The greatest thing from Quebec since Celine Dion and GSP.
A pair of siblings.
A couple of stellar young men.
Two brothers.
These two young men. Two siblings. The hard-hitting pair represent Canada.
Well, hello, it's Chris here. Unfortunately, I just realized my cell phone has shut down again. We're not going to have a recording, so we're going to have to stick with the voices for this episode. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Thinkin Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. And today we're going to be talking about the chapter 3 and 4 of The End of Education by Neil Postman. You know, it's our first two-parter, I think. Work smarter, not harder. And obviously. And the second, well, actually the first thing we're going to be discussing before that is going to be our opening segment. And it's going to be a spooky psychological study of clairvoyance or something like that.
It's literally specifically not clairvoyance.
Yeah, it's specifically not clairvoyance, and even making the distinction as a psychologist is ridiculous. But it's called Feeling the Future.
It's about precognition and premonition.
Yeah, experimental evidence for anomalous retroactive influences on cognition and affect. So do you want to introduce it a little bit?
As you might have guessed by the name, it's a bit supernatural. It's about scientific, psychological, Chris wouldn't want to call it scientific, but at least psychological experiments about...
No, there are numbers in there.
The definition of science, numbers, about how the future might be affecting the present, about how we might be able to see into the future. And so the premise of the whole paper is taking sort of classic psychology paradigms, cognitive psychology paradigms, and temporally flipping them.
Yeah, I actually have a quote for this.
I think it was, like, at least, I know you're going to probably go hard on it, but at least it was written, like, exactly like a scientific article.
Yeah, no. I was going to propose that we kind of look at it from the normal perspective, so the skeptic's perspective, and try to go as deep as possible on that perspective. But then we just reverse it and have another conversation as a supporter. Because I feel like there's a lot of here that can be supported.
Yeah, but it was well written, I think, well structured, and also I felt there was humor in there, like at 2 or 3 points. Oh, but you skimmed at the end, so...
No, but that's the thing. Yeah, I read the thing at the end with the metaphors, believing one unlikely thing before their breakfast or something like that.
Right, yeah.
But the thing is, I wanted to ask you, for how long... Like, I didn't give you context on this paper, right? This could have been, a paper released on the 1st of April by Cornell to do something like that. How long did you believe this to be potentially a joke? Like, did you have it in the back of your mind that this could potentially be tongue-in-cheek?
Always. I actually just forgot to
think about that, right?
No, I forgot to check on the internet while I was reading it. I can't find myself to, like, I can't convince myself that this is true, and so I was gonna check. I don't know if that literature, the extensive literature that they're talking about, exists that proves this effect. If it is an April Fool's thing. If it's been cited, if it's been checked, because they actively encourage people to do their study on their own and see if they get the results. And I wonder if people have done that.
Yeah, and it's written by this one researcher called Bem. It's interesting. I tried to do my research on whether this was indeed some kind of big joke. But there were articles by the New Yorker or something written about how, a scientific proof for psychic powers finally goes out.
But the thing is, like, maybe it was like in some articles, but I've never actually heard about it. I feel like it would be a bigger thing if
it was as conclusive as he says.
Yeah, but the effects are very small too.
Well, that's the thing. I saw you circled 53%. We'll get to what that exactly means later on. And when they say significantly more than chance, Significantly more in science doesn't mean 70%. It just means there's a large enough sample that even 51 could be significantly more than chance. That's all it means.
Right, and in
Like-
this case, 53 is enough.
Yeah, and seeing that 53 literally shouldn't indicate any information to you. You don't know what that means, right? Because if you coin flip a coin a billion times and you get 50.5%, it's probably worrisome, right? Something like that.
Probably, yeah. At some point, yeah.
Yeah, if you
I see what
flip
you're
one of the sides. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Again, this was a sample size of 100, which is respectable, but it's not.
Yeah, but according to statistics, that's what it takes. Like, this is what it takes for it to be worrying, as you say.
Yeah, but what it could mean when you just take the meaning of the word significantly, right? Like, if you're expecting a 70, you're not going to get a 70. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, you get that. So
yeah. Well, what you mean is there's a difference between statistical significance and practical meaning
yeah, of significance.
of significance. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. So, okay, to those who are familiar with priming in psychology, essentially, it's just when a word of a negative association or maybe aggressive association or whatever is flashed on a screen just before you can actually perceive it and read it and acknowledge that you have read it.
For a
But your
short
subcon-
enough time
Yeah.
period, so you can't.
Yeah. So, but your subconscious allegedly acknowledges it, and there's quite conclusive evidence that it is indeed the case. And then you flash a neutral, not flash, you show a neutral image on the screen, and then they have to take an unaffected decision on whether that is, for example, an image of aggression or not. Like, that's an example of a task of priming,
okay.
right? And then obviously the unconscious priming is going to affect how they act, supposedly. And there are a variety of tasks. So here's a paragraph that for me was pretty funny. In recent years, priming experiments have become a staple of cognitive social psychology. In a typical effective priming experiment, participants are asked to judge as quickly as they can whether a picture is pleasant or unpleasant, and their response time is measured. Just before the picture appears, a positive or negative word, beautiful, ugly, is flashed briefly on the screen. The word is called the prime. Individuals typically respond more quickly when the valences of the prime and the picture are congruent, both are positive or both are negative, than when they are incongruent. In our retroactive version of the procedure, the prime appeared after rather than before the participants made their judgments of the pictures. So it just feels like when he's writing that, he has this like, what do you call it? Like mind blown thing. Like, we've done it this way, but have you guys tried it the other way? It's just funny. Like, you could take anything in psychology and just be like, but is the reverse effect true? Like, for example, I mean, no, that's not even this fun. I was going to say, I don't know, does charitable priming affect how much you give to charity? But then how much you give to charity is probably going to prime you to be charitable or think charitably, whatever. It's not as interesting. Now, the only way to not see this as a joke, and we'll get to the specific examples, is the kind of quantum explanation, right? Retrocausation, I think it's called, or quantum entanglement of particles. And it's that there are like some quantum things going on of things in the universe just having the reverse effect than what we usually believe it to have. Now, these are just metaphors to think about what is happening here. They're not in any way conclusive or explanatory. They're just like ways to rationalize it if you don't want to say, okay, people thinking about images appearing on one side or the other literally causes them to appear on one side or the other. Like, if you don't want to necessarily accept that as a psychic thing, or anyway, something has to explain the arrow of causation.
Once again, they were very careful to like parse out the different supernatural events that could occur. And here they're saying they ruled out that it's the participants affecting what was going to happen in the future. Some way. I don't remember. No, really, I don't remember how, but it's not clairvoyance. I think clairvoyance is there's a barrier and then you see through it, literally. And then what you were saying is them affecting the future. But what they're trying to prove and what they're trying to separate from all the others is literally just seeing the future. knowing what, or feeling or knowing what will happen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can you explain the first experiment? Then I'll have a bunch of things to say about that.
I don't remember exactly what the first one was.
Okay, so essentially there are two veils on screens on the left and on the right of the participant. And under one of them was an erotic picture and on the other was a neutral picture.
Okay.
But essentially that wasn't the case yet. So the participants were told that this was the case, right? One of them was hiding this picture, while the other was hiding this picture. But in actuality, the screens were still not on and the position of the picture wasn't chosen. And essentially,
well, the screen was on. It just showed two like black things hiding the pictures, let's say.
okay.
It's just the picture.
I thought it was a physical veil, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
Oh.
It doesn't matter. And so obviously the participants had to guess which one it was under, like the erotic picture, I think. And then they did, but what was actually happening is that the computer was determining where the picture was after their decision.
Yeah.
So this was a way to isolate the phenomenon that Alex was talking about. So now, what was funny to me is that he goes on this, well, to me it was a tangent, about random number generators and their quantum, like, viability.
Why quantum? Just their randomness viability.
Right, their randomness viability from a like deeply mathematical perspective.
Yeah.
Essentially, he's like, okay, so you guys have heard of the task. You've gotten the fact that 53% of trials actually chose the right image, but not chose the right image, but chose the screen on which the image would then be decided to be on. So this is obviously a phenomenon. Now let's talk about one of the only problems with this experiment, and it's the fact that random number generators are actually only pseudo random number generators from a deeply mathematical perspective. And it's this, essentially they use this process that isn't perfectly random and that actually takes into consideration the number that came right before. And bear in mind, all the random number generator has to do is generate 1 or 2 to display the target picture on one of the two screens. It's between 1 and 2. That's all.
That's all what I was talking about though before. This is like one important part, is that the pseudo number generators work according to an algorithm, and once the task has begun, it would have had the string of decisions already like somewhere in its database, right? So it's random, but it's pseudo random because it's created and you have the list. And
somewhere deep in the computer.
That would have involved clairvoyance. They could have seen this string of numbers and somehow discovered it. But this real number generator, like the best we have apparently, is based on physical properties, like on the decay of radioactive matter or something, where you base your random number generator on some physical property that we know is random, and that, as you go along, decides what numbers is getting picked next. And clairvoyance is ruled out because it picks every time randomly, I guess.
Exactly. So just to understand the depth of the problem with this experiment, as identified by BEM, it is that there is a certain like formula that essentially predetermines the sequence of 1s and 2s that is going to be in the experiment. So just to isolate the phenomenon he's after, he's worried that it could be misinterpreted as clairvoyance because the participants, or even another one, right? And it was the fact that the sequence randomly named by the participant could have matched a certain pattern by accident,
right,
with what the computer had.
Like there could have been a random bias that both the computer and the participant had, and both were in the same direction, or like had the same pattern.
Yeah. So, wow. So now,
but the thing is, I think he has to do that in an experiment like so unbelievable as this. You have to, like, even you, the ultimate psychology skeptic and paper hater instantly said like one possible explanation for this is quantum entanglement. Not like the experiment is bad because of this. He had to like cover his bases as much as he could because no one was going to believe this.
Sure, and obviously I'm no like big scientist, but what to me would have been sufficient is straight up just use the random number generator on Google. When you write random number generator, set the values between 1 and 2.
Probably
like,
in the literature that's not enough. Whatever the literature
yeah,
is.
that's the thing. Like I feel like it's one of those things that if you don't bring it up, if it is enough, right? Because all you need is something that you can't control and that is truly random. But again, obviously here he says, well, let's talk about what truly random actually means, and it's the radioactive decay. Anyway.
Yeah, and also it's important not to use the Google number generator because you want to rule out like clairvoyance and all the other things. If you're truly deep into that precognition, premonition thing, he seems to truly believe it. It's useful in that way too.
Yeah. So, okay, as Alex pointed out in reading this article, after that, it's basically a repetition of the same task, or at least the same principle, because we described the reverse priming thing. Now we've described this under the veil picture generation thing. It's essentially just a little bit of a higher likelihood of predicting something that will be determined after the fact. For every experiment, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. The results, there are multiple results, and I think you have to.
And it's all between 51 and 53%.
Exactly. Yeah, we would have had to like specifically note down results, and it would have been good to have like a list and be able to tell them all. That would have been simple, but I just didn't take notes on this.
We could have.
I think a result of the first experiment was that I don't think it was exclusively erotic versus neutral. Oh, unless I'm forgetting experiment 1. But anyway, the erotic pictures are recurrent in the studies here because they're thought to be able to provoke even more.
That's the thing. That's the thing that I found really funny in the beginning. Okay, it was in my notes though, and it's that it's in justifying the existence of this phenomenon called psi, right? PSI. This is, by the way, like this is essentially the thing he's trying to ascertain here. He says it would make sense for it evolutionarily.
Yeah.
And it would be adaptive for us to have such a not premonition, but whatever, this psi, because in situations of arousal, and then experiment 2 is fear, fear.
Yeah.
Just like he sets the stage for it to make sense in our heads. Like, okay, it might sound unbelievable, but it would make sense for us to be able to predict the placement of arousing things and of
but without saying it might sound unbelievable.
Well, I mean, he acknowledges it at the end at the very least.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
yeah,
I mean, people already hate on evolutionary explanations enough. He's just, well, the thing is also he doesn't propose any mechanism really. Like he says at the end, maybe quantum, but I don't know, basically.
Yeah, he says maybe quantum, but think about it only as a metaphor, not as an actual explanation of what is happening. Like it's not like some particles in your head are entangled with what's going to happen on the screen. And what's also interesting is if you give the quantum explanation, I feel like you can't really just evoke it, right? You can't just sit people down during an experiment and be like, all right, do the quantum thing. It's things that are extremely unlikely kind of by definition. So if you use that explanation, first of all, it would happen in one of the 100 participants. That's the thing I would only believe about psi, is that it couldn't be proven statistically because it wouldn't happen on demand. It would happen just like actual retroaction or retrocausation would happen, right? Where you say this is going to happen, and because you said that, the likelihood of it happening increases, and it happens. But that could never be proven because
I think you're mixing it up again. It's not about me affecting the future.
Oh, it's about you predicting the future.
Just knowing the future already.
Okay, so let us clarify what it's not. Very, very important.
But
here.
Can you? I think from the abstract, he says in there, there's precognition, you thinking.
Here, I have the list of the 4 things he really wants us to know it's not. Okay. Precognition or retroactive influence. The participant is, in fact, assessing information yet to be determined in the future, implying that the direction of the causal arrow has been reversed. 2. Clairvoyance/remote viewing. The participant is accessing already determined information in real time, information that is stored in the computer. This is what kind of the pattern predetermined by the algorithm implies that we talked about.
That's why it's problematic.
Yeah, it's obviously problematic. So that we need not a pseudo random number generator, but a real one, like with atoms and stuff. Psychokinesis. The participant is actually influencing the RNG's placement of the targets. So this is not what it is. This is not what it has to be.
The first one was what it was.
Okay.
Precognition.
So psychokinesis is the thing that I often misinterpret it to be. So it's very important to remember it's not that.
For everyone to remember it.
Artifactual correlation. The output from the RNG is inadequately randomized, containing patterns that fortuitously match participants' response biases. This is a thing I would write for the April 1st thing, right? Fortuitously, quantumly fortuitously match participant responses, biases. This produces a spurious correlation between the participants' guesses and the computer's placements of the target's picture. So, okay. Yeah, I think we kind of described all of those possible explanations.
He talks about the literature. He says there's extensive literature that finds statistically significant but very small effects. And this is pretty much what he finds here for his 9 studies. His goal was to make psi research more accessible. He made it as simple as possible. The statistical analyses were not much. He said he wanted to use like t-tests at most or something equivalent to make it replicable. And this is quite recent, right?
Yeah, 2010, I think.
Okay.
We've taken the hater side, which is kind of the status quo. Now, if we were to buy into this, right? Well, actually, let's talk about the file drawer problem. I think you circled it, but what he also came across in his research is among the 9 papers that he does report, experiments, is like 50 others that he doesn't report. Is that not true?
No, I think what you're referring to is that...
Oh, there are 50 other papers he could have reported.
No. Are you thinking about 46?
Something like that,
yeah. Yeah. No, he's saying to address the file drawer problem and to make it less likely that people think it's that.
That's where I skimmed.
He says the literature has been reviewed, and they found it very unlikely that the file drawer problem is as follows. The scientist could make 10 experiments about what he's trying to prove. 9 of them fail. The 9 first fail, which points science and humanity in the direction that the phenomenon that the scientist is trying to prove is not really true. But he puts them in the file drawer, never publishes them, and no one will ever know. And he publishes the last one, and that's the only one that people see. And then it seems like, oh, look, this paper has been released proving this or supporting this phenomenon, and people are drawn to believe it, even though 9 previous studies failed. And what he's saying is that during the literature review, what they found was that it's extremely unlikely that the file drawer problem is a problem, because for every study published that they analyzed, to make the result of the meta-analysis not significant, there would have had to be 46 unreported study for every single study they reported.
Oh, wow.
That found non-significant results.
Okay, I did skim that.
So he's saying it's very unlikely that it's the file drawer problem, because, I mean, it would have be an insane amount of unreported studies. I think they reviewed 309 experiments, and so you could imagine 46 times 309 unreported ones, which I think is unlikely. Yeah.
So again, I guess that's where he actually covered his base, and it works in that sense, but I'm sure there's something, there's just something, right? I mean, I'm sure a bunch of conspiracy theorists, scientists around the world want to prove the existence of psi and have failed multiple times. Because if you could do it on demand, just sit people down and make him predict the future, I feel like it would be a bigger thing, right? Essentially, especially after writing a solid paper such as this, things would follow and we would hear about psi, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I was saying in the beginning. I feel like we would be hearing about this more, which is why I was driven to think this was a joke. But at the same time, like, it's not that big a thing. Maybe, once again, as a scientist, I'm prone to not believe this. And I mean, I read it, the statistics say what they say, but I'm still not, I still don't want to believe it. The effect is very small. It's still, you need 100 participants running a bunch of trials, and you find that a bit above chance they get it. It's like, I guess, obviously subconscious for everyone. No one realizes it unless people that truly believe it. And it doesn't always happen. It's just above chance.
Yeah, but a lot of things are like that for real phenomena that we accept, and it's just because they're more likely that we actually accept them, I feel like.
Like what?
I don't know the specific statistics on anything, but what I mean is the way he statistically covers his bases is that what you were saying is that, oh, it doesn't always happen. Okay, but statistically, for it to be an actual phenomenon, what he's saying is that he would have to have 46 unreported 46 studies disproving it, where the effect isn't found, for you to disprove one where the effect is found. And if this is indeed true, there seems to be something going on here. Anyway.
No, but all I was saying is, it's not a thing where, okay, I can see the future and right now I know what'll happen for all these things. I think it's subconscious and very, very slight. Maybe
Fair
you can
enough.
see only not so far in the future and predict only simple events, something like that, and only some of the time. Like as you said in the beginning, like practically almost insignificant.
Okay, so we, even if we do take the side where we defend him, and I definitely get it now, because when I wanted to defend him, I think I had the affecting the future in mind. Affecting the future, right? Not just predicting the future. But now that we're talking about, okay, it's predicting the future in the next 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And with what minor physiological differences in your state, or I don't know, priming. What was the memory task? Like you remember words on a list better if they are the ones that you're going to be revising later on.
Yeah, that if you were going to be trained on them later on. So funny.
So again, we are the practical podcast, but today we will come short.
Practically, just please ignore this.
Yeah, please.
No, I don't know.
It was fun to read. Like,
it was fun to read. If I was gonna disseminate, I feel like if my voice is not here.
Yeah. Also, disseminate isn't a word, but it's all good. Allegedly,
You're a hater.
Allegedly,
that's going in the compilation. If I was gonna talk to people about this and be like, we can see in the future, you have to believe this. This is an important thing. I would have to do much more research and look into the background of this and look into the literature and at what experts think and how legit it seems.
But
I'm just not going to talk about it.
Honestly, not even, because he really does his job. Like, okay, here are 9 experiments. Here is the number of things you need to disprove them. The evidence is all there. Like, this is your full, like, meta-analysis. It's all you need.
Yeah.
And still you read it and you take his side and you're like, okay, what now? That's the thing.
Okay, yeah. I see.
Oh, let's accept everything Bem is saying. How can we use this? I don't know. Plan on revising and training words when you want to memorize them in the future. Like,
yeah, the practical significance is revise for your exam after your exam if you don't have time before, and you'll be good.
Or even trick the universe and just plan to revise it for your exam after your exam, and maybe you'll get 0.5% more on the exam. Like, that's all. That's all there is to it, unfortunately. Okay, the End of Education, chapter 3 and 4. We were anticipating a new god last week, and it feels like we won the lottery because he gave us 5.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the most interesting and important part. In New Gods That Fail, he goes over chapter 3, he goes over two gods, I guess in more detail, that fail, who are the gods of technology and multiculturalism. Although multiculturalism he puts in quotes, and rightfully so, because he's really not describing multiculturalism. It's like more like monoculturalism, but not for white people.
Yeah. And again, I keep forgetting when this was written, and we didn't even mention it
before 2000, right?
Yeah, before the year 2000. And when you
before
hear
Y2K, right?
Before when you hear, please, I'm talking right now. When you hear Neil talk, like, first of all of these like genius thinkers that can quote Niels Bohr and then turn to Socrates and then turn to whoever, they always seem prophetic. This is what happens with Alan Watts, right? The way he talks about war, I haven't talked to you about it, but the way he predicts the effect of drugs on the youth. He has all these genius podcasts where he just absolutely, before it was even a thing, he predicts the future. And here's what happens with technology. Is this this is the chapter. We're going to discuss what he believes technology will do. And it really seems prophetic. And it feels like the common point between all these people is that they're genuinely curious about absolutely everything. Well, where they're gonna read about like quantum entanglement just out of pure curiosity to know what's going on in the universe, right? These people, and it feels like that curiosity to me, again, this is a tangent, but makes them prophetic. They just know what's gonna happen because they've studied what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not me advocating for history knowledge.
Oh.
I mean knowing actually what happens in the universe for real, and that is done by learning about people and learning about science and how the world
for all the
functions.
hate about history, historians, like the good historians, are pretty cool. Thomas Kuhn and Neil Postman, I guess. He's not a historian, but yeah. Okay. As I think we should refresh, because we can't expect people to listen to the last episode necessarily. The End of Education is about emphasizing the need for a narrative for education. You can't think that all school is about is just teaching topics and material to kids. Education in school has to have a story. Why are we teaching kids what we are teaching them? And the End of Education says, right now, we're losing narratives. We don't have one, and proposes future directions. What possible narratives, or as he calls them, gods, are possible in the future and may take the place. Otherwise, schools are just going to end, and there's not going to be education.
Yeah, chapter 2 was some gods that fail. We discuss, old gods that failed communism, Nazism, with all these promises and all these followers. And chapter 3 was obviously, as Alex said, some new gods that fail. Those are technology and fake multiculturalism. And in chapter 4, he proposes new gods, and gods that may serve is the title. So here's a quote that I had written down for the god of technology. As the discussion proceeds, important distinctions are made among the difference between meanings of belief, but at some point it becomes far from asinine to speak of the god of technology, in the sense that people believe technology works, that they rely on it, that it makes promises, that they are bereft when denied access to it, that they are delighted when they are in its presence, that for most people it works in mysterious ways, that they condemn people who speak against it, that they stand in awe of it, and that in born-again mode, they will alter their lifestyles, their schedules, their habits, and their relationships to accommodate it. If this be not a form of religious belief, what is? This is just a good exposition of what a god is and what he means by it, right? He's like, look, guys, technology is your god, obviously. Look at all these facts. And when he says, early 90s, or I don't know, late 90s, he says, and for some it works in mysterious ways, or like for most it works in mysterious ways. It's kind of funny.
Even more true now. People don't know how Wi-Fi works.
It's true. Yeah, Chris D'Elia has this bit where he says, look, if you give me a year and all the materials to build a rocket, I'll figure something out. But Wi-Fi, like I can like telephone poles, like I can speak to a person in another country. How's that possible? So, and again, this well, actually, another folk from the internet also says this about depression. He says that most people who believe it to be true become its promotional team and essentially worship it, in the sense that when you say it doesn't exist or that you can be affected by it, they're going to defend it. So it was just a cool parallel for me to kind of understand that point of view and have this exposition of a god and understand that, you know, what it comes associated with is it acting in mysterious ways. Sometimes I just wake up sad. You having to, you know, have a time and place to worship it. You know, you just slumber in your sadness at some point. You having to defend it. Like, no, it does exist. It is a thing, you know? You know what I'm saying?
I don't like the parallel, but
I'm sure you don't. So, you psychology folks are all the same. You can't believe one unlikely thing before breakfast. So, now, okay, I still don't know to this day. In my notes, I have God or pill. And I think it's because of my parallel with depression, but I actually don't know. Maybe praying is taking your diazepam. What's that?
Is technology a god, or is it just a pill to make us forget about problems and temporarily pretend we have a narrative?
Certainly
I don't know.
not what I meant.
No?
It doesn't click, but it doesn't matter. I have a bunch of other notes. So the utopian view of technology. This is really funny, and this is where you see the difference between what I call these prophetic thinkers and people who were in the beginning of technology exposed to it. Right? You remember the little Timmy experiment where people were just like,
I feel like to think that you would have to not only
be so oblivious to human experience, right?
Exactly, yeah. Not only be unparalleledly optimistic about technology, but also like not have lived with people and not know how people work and be it's sort of, you know, when you're a kid and you're convinced that this new thing, well, in life also, but this new thing is going to solve all your problems. I need this car, and after this car I'm going to be happy forever, and it's going to fix all my problems. And then you get the new teleguided car, you play with it for 2 days, and then you're on to the next hype. I feel like this is what it is. You think like, oh, technology is going to come, and before humanity we were sinners. Like we were sinners and we didn't know anything, and we were lazy and everything, but this is going to fix everything, and it's obviously not.
Yeah, so essentially Neil quotes somebody, well, in fact, a few people, about their perspectives on the future of technology. But this is around when the internet was coming out, correct? As in what I understand.
Probably. The one thing I was thinking about while reading this is he nitpicky? That could be. He could be more nitpicky than it seems. But at the same time, I do expect that one current of thought that was quite popular was this, right? Was the optimism about technology.
In the sense that it wasn't shared by many, but even those people had quite strong stances. And essentially the little Timmy thing is, instead of now little Timmy being bored and isolated from information, when before he goes to sleep, with the amazing and revolutionary access to the internet, he is going to be able to put on a documentary or read an encyclopedia right from his room, right before going to sleep.
About the history of Japan.
Yeah, about the history of Japan, and become a richer and more knowledgeable person.
Or Sally, who has insomnia and can't sleep, can find comfort in learning arithmetic and further math in the comfort of her own home.
Yeah. In this vision, there is, it seems to me, a confident and typical sense of unreality. Little Ava can't sleep, so she decides to learn a little algebra. Where did little Ava come from? Mars? If not, it is more likely she will tune into a good movie. Young John decides that he wants to learn history of modern Japan. How did young John come to this point? How is it that he never visited a library up to now? Or is it that he too couldn't sleep and decided a little more modern Japanese history would be just what he needed? So essentially what Neil argues for is that, yes, internet created an incredible access to all the resources, but in reality, that access was already there, and it was never the limiting factor. That is his main point.
Right.
The information is not what people come to school for. Libraries existed always. People, like adults, could talk to kids always. What school does and will continue to do through the revolution of technology is structure that information in an actual useful way.
And give a meaning to why do we learn that information?
Well, obviously, yeah, that's the ultimate thing. But this is the thing with the early supporters of technologies. What they don't understand is a kid with a library is as lost as a kid with the access to the entirety of the internet. They don't know what to do, why persist in a train of thought.
I was going to say, like, you can see that Neil is a teacher and he knows kids.
Oh, yeah.
But also, it doesn't take that to understand that kids, when they can't sleep, are not... Because if the argument is that later kids can just go on what is going to be phones and look at the history of modern Japan, you can't expect that if right now, when they can't sleep, they don't read a book about the history of modern Japan.
Yeah, just turn on the nightlight and listen to, listen to
the barrier is reduced a bit because you can just look it up on the internet, but exactly, that's not the main problem. The main problem is motivation and interest.
Yeah, and it's just, we're on the verge of another technological revolution with AI, and I strongly feel like all of these principles are right here, and they're exactly what is going to happen, right? Kids having access to VR aren't suddenly going to become richer in experience and become better at 3D rotation, become little architects because they're going to have what people 20 years ago did by hand in terms of architectures. They're going to build it with snapping their fingers in a 3D space in Meta or something like that, right? It's not what's going to happen. They're still just going to be playing video games and spiking their dopamine uselessly and be completely unguided and be useless. We're on the verge of another technological revolution, and all of these principles that he's saying as a prophetic thinker are going to take place again. Like, this is not going to... And this comes back to our discussion a few episodes ago about how the effect of technology on intelligence. Like, whatever. Even if they found a good effect on it, I'm not buying it. Whatever you're selling, yo, I'm not buying, yo. That's from Breaking Bad. Thank you. Now, the main question he asks, and again, very good question to ask. I'm sure it touched you as well. Is after all is said and done with technology, the real question isn't how we're using it, but how it's using us. You remember that?
Yeah. I think it's looking at the right direction.
Yeah.
You call it like prophetic thinkers.
Yeah.
I just think it's really like those people that thought technology was going to solve all our problems are honestly just kids themselves and just looking at the wrong thing. And it is sort of prophetic to think that far ahead and to say, oh wow, something that facilitates life so much and that gives us so much comfort and ease. Let's not look at what it could bring to us, but what the consequences of it could be. It's insightful to think that way.
I think I'll read out in the entire passage because I think it is a pretty good point in this chapter. In the second place, what we need to know about cars, as we need to know about computers, television, and other important technologies, is not how to use them, but how they use us. In the case of cars, what we need to think about is, in the early 20th century, was not how to drive them, but what they would do to our air, our landscape, our social relations, our family life, and our cities. Suppose that in 1946, we had started to address similar questions about television. What would be its effects on our political institutions, our psychic habits, our children, our religious conceptions, and our economy, wouldn't we be better positioned today to control television's massive assault on American culture? I'm talking here about making technology itself an object of inquiry, so that little Eva and young John, in using technologies, will not be used or abused by them. So that little Eva and young John become more interested in asking questions about the computer than in getting answers from it.
Uh-huh.
And this is the cost, right? That we've talked about a few episodes ago. The cost in intelligence, the cost in autonomy. And in itself, I don't think the autonomy that these kids are losing by having essentially a cyborg brain that they can just dump tasks onto, like reading summaries. Late high school, I had this teacher that all she asks is read 20-page papers and summarize them in a paragraph. That, for this podcast and for a lot of other purposes in life, right? Writing memos about entire days to your boss or something like that. Summarizing in a comprehensive way is an extremely valuable skill.
Because for me, also summarizing and writing is thinking, and writing is going to help you memorize the information.
Yeah.
And especially important is the thinking part. In writing a summary, you have to actually have understood those 20 pages, understood the message that it carries, parse through the useless sentences, useful sentences, and get the meaning of what the paper was. And you actually have thought about it, revised it at least once. You're going to remember it better. You're able to explain it to other people, and it's integrated within the network of knowledge in your brain, as opposed to I read the paper, did the assignment, forgot it, and that's it.
Yeah, now even if you imagine the perfect version of a kid who's using AI, and he like reads the initial text, feeds the AI the text, and then asks to summarize it in a paragraph, and then reads the paragraph and just signs off on it like, yeah, this is fine. It's still not nearly enough, right? For the development of that skill specifically.
Yeah, because reading the article once in its entirety is usually not enough. Like, if you want to have a book mean something to you and be useful to you, you have to, as you read the book, take notes, annotate, underline what's important, what hits you. Otherwise, you think, oh, this is interesting. You skip over it, you finish the book. A week later, you've forgotten what happened.
Exactly. Okay, so the other big point is that technology, again, if he were actually to answer the question of, okay, what is this going to cost us? One of the big things is going to cost us is socialization, right? The privatization of the access to all of the information of the world actually makes, well, from the positive perspective, now you don't have to necessarily go to school, and on sick days you can just listen in. On the other hand, you can become completely isolated, and one of the things school actually provides and necessitates is interacting with others. And this is where the funny book name comes in. Everything I really needed to know about life I learned in kindergarten, right? He says, wash your hands before you eat. Don't hit back when others hit you. Don't take what's not yours. Whatever. Like I'm making up stuff. Like brush your teeth. Essentially, when he says that, it clicks, and it's really funny. Like, yeah, like I guess we could have done without the math if we were just decent human beings who, I don't know, weren't mean to the person in front of us in line because they got the spot in front.
The argument doesn't need to be
deep.
All you need from school is that. School also teaches you material and knowledge, which is very, very good. But a big part of school is you're forced to live in a society, and we live in a society.
Deep.
Sorry. And you're forced to socialize and to learn how to live. And honestly, that's the most important thing. You just need to know how to interact with other humans and know how to do it properly. And that's a big part of what school does.
Yeah. And then he says, but yeah, look at the other things that are happening to our youth. Okay, they're going to have that technology and information, but look at the structure of it, right? The statistics were kids from 1 to 12 growing up with one parent or something like that. From the 1960s, it was at 1%. In the 1990s, it was at 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Man, when I read that, I was...
With one parent, 50%?
Yeah, something like that. And it's about the increase, right? Like, if a marriage wasn't really the thing we claim it to be from the very beginning, it would be that worrisome. But from 1960 to 1990, a 49% increase. No. I'm sorry, not a 49% increase, a 5,000% increase. Right?
Is it single parenthood? Because that sounds
okay. I can look it up. I
think you should.
Jamie. In 1960, less than 1% of their children under 18 experienced the divorce of their parents. In 1990, the figure was almost a 50%.
Okay,
Experienced
divorce, but not living with one parent.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, which is related to the socialization and knowing how to live in groups. What schools also do is that teachers are sensitive to that stuff. What's like something happened at home, the kid is really sad, they're reactive, they adapt ideally. I'm not saying this always happens, but ideally they adapt. They're humans and they know that things happen at home with the kids and they emotionally support them. A computer is not going to care and it's not going to offer you any support or any understanding towards emotional problems.
Indeed. So then there's the multiculturalism thing. I think it's more of an American thing. It's more of a late 90s thing. I mean, it's obviously going on right now, but it's not really worth talking about the hyphenated American war versus the American war. Did you not spot the term hyphenated American?
Yeah, I don't remember what it was though. I remember hyphenated, but
like African hyphen American.
Oh, okay.
Italian hyphen American.
Oh, I see. Okay,
eliminating the hyphen, he said. And on page 50, he has this badass quote that says, "I know a false god when I see one," which stuck with me, obviously.
He like created a battlefield and he's declaring himself the winner of that battlefield.
Yeah. Okay. Chapter 4, Gods That May Serve. Do you have an overview of it? Or should we just go? Okay.
Well, this is what we were looking forward to, the proposed new gods. What he's saying is not that one of these 5 gods is going to dominate the future and this is what it's going to be. He knows that narratives are present in different proportions, in different societies, but what he's saying is that these 5 gods have the potential to be actually meaningful, useful, and can bring us together and create a narrative for school, which is not present right now. And I guess a rough overview, God number 1, the spaceship Earth. The realization that the universe is big, that Earth is not immortal, and that we need to protect nature because we're just tenants. He used some sort of terminology like that on Earth. The fallen angel. The endless pursuit of being better. Never thinking you're at the final point of knowledge, of morality, of anything, and just continuously thinking, okay, I'm flawed, I know this, let's get better, and understanding that other people are like this and that you are like this, and getting better together. The American experiment. Again, we're not that familiar with American history and culture, but I guess the American experiment is creating a government by the people for the people and emphasizing free speech, I think. The thing that's important is that the government and the future and society is a continual argument. We're never going to arrive at the one right answer. We should let everyone speak and continuously be an argument, and that's how we're going to keep adjusting, and ideally having a good society. For the law of diversity, I think this is pretty simple. Just continuously allowing immigrant culture, other cultures into the mainstream, which always is going to keep, spicing up, giving more nuance, giving new knowledge, giving opposing views so that we may snap out of our biases and learn more. And the number 5 narrative is the word weavers, the world makers, which just emphasizes the importance of language. That one was less clear to me, I guess. But whatever, we can talk about them one by one.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. But, in the beginning was the word. So obviously from the religious perspective, the language is the most important thing. And then also, he quite clearly says all the ways in which we actually create reality through the use of language. And there was a blog that I wrote, which is called The Verbal Fabric of the Universe, which essentially emphasizes the entire point of how we create reality. So, okay, the spaceship Earth.
He called it.
This is a thing, and it may come from our multicultural background, but this is a thing that I've been saying since I was 13. What do you mean, hyphenated American? What do you mean, white? We're all just humans. And that has stuck with me, and I've always thought about humanity. There's not humans or this group, this group, this group. It's always been about humanity. And yes, the metaphor of the spaceship Earth, where we're just all residents on one spaceship that is one day going to run out of resources, fuel. It's gonna die out, and we need to kind of get somewhere all together if we want to survive in the long term. And obviously, the concerns of others become your concerns. This is a big point as well, right? Like an explosion on the other side of the ship becomes problematic because, hey, we're damaging the ship. The environmental impact of companies in China suddenly becomes your problem because whatever. And sure, there's some temporal problems with that in the sense that, look, the actual repercussions of that are going to only be felt in, 200 years? So I can just, safely ride during my lifetime. But then your kids are going to be on that ship, right? So you have to consider all these things. But the quote here is taking care of the capsule. You have to take care of your capsule. And it's a cure for not my problem. Oh, and this is a quote that I really liked. And I noted it down, and it may be my Instagram description, so I really care about it. And it's, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Right? So it's always your calling. And this goes back to the principle that really stuck when Philip said it, to the fact that all the evil things that happen in the world and all the things you hate, if you use them as a mirror of your own faults within yourself, you will find that if people are stealing out of poverty, it means that you're not doing enough, right? It means that you're not giving enough or something like that, right? Like as an
in
extreme
all situations,
case.
yeah, you just...
Yeah. So again, if you see it as a spaceship Earth, you become charitable and a good person and a virtuous person because you're now going to take care of your capsule, and the bell is always going to toll for thee, right? It's never going to be like, not my problem. There are explosions on that side of the Earth and blah, blah, blah.
There's the universality and the globalization part, and where everyone's problems become everyone's problems. But there's also the environmental part, which I think has, since then, I mean, it was important then for culture, but it has evolved and is even more meaningful now and even more talked about. He really just he called it.
Yeah. The fallen angel. And here, if you take the two words in isolation, they kind of explain the entirety of the thing. So fallen means that we're error prone. Everyone is error prone. Obviously, it's perceived that this guy is religious because this we're all sinners thing, I personally don't like. I understand, yes, we're all imperfect, but when people say that from a religious perspective, it's always like, oh, you always owe to God to, correct some mistake that you make, because the mistakes are, you're obviously going to sin as a human, but why can't it just stop at, I don't know enough about the world to act in the correct way? It doesn't have to be like a sin thing, or...
I think it is a sin thing. If you think about sloth,
yeah,
you're gonna be lazy at some point in the future, and the idea is you have to be critical and realize that you're a sinner and that...
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just, if you just absolutely the same principles we're talking about, But if you frame it from the virtue ethics perspective and you just say, look, you're going to be a more virtuous and flourished person if you avoid
Vice.
Yeah. If you avoid these vices for your own sake or
Sure.
for their own sake, you must do this for yourself and become a better version of yourself. But when everyone comes in and says, "Oh, you're sinning in front of Jesus and you owe him to get better," like I understand, yeah, it's the shift in perspective. We're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
I just don't like using the word "we're all sinners." Like,
Okay. I thought you were taking this. Yeah.
no, humans are error prone. There doesn't seem anything to be wrong with, like, to me, there's nothing wrong with that sentence. Humans are error prone, almost, inevitably.
I think there's just a distinction between error prone in the sense that we don't know enough, and so we're ignorant and we don't do this, and morally error prone.
Right, like
you do something wrong.
Yeah, and obviously the softest example of that is laziness. Yeah. And we're all going to indulge in it inevitably. Like, yeah. It's always going to happen.
It doesn't matter how you frame it. The thing is, what this chapter emphasizes is that you need to realize that we are error prone morally in terms of knowledge, and it is an absolute mistake to think in absolute terms. And that's a quote, and you could put that in your bio. And it relates to the gods that failed, right, of communism and Nazism. Those people thought that they figured it out. We have the system. Everyone else, we should stop thinking. This is it. We're there. We've arrived. And that's the mistake. That's a mistake.
And he definitely strokes me in the right sense of the feathers here, because he says that, when he frames science as the bare minimum of human functioning?
Yeah, right.
He's like, I think he quotes some scientist that says science is just the human mind functioning properly. So essentially, he says, look, when we say that science has all the answers and it's the perfect way of thinking, no. Doubting your own intuitions and then testing them and then coming to intermediary conclusions, that's just the bare minimum we can do. Like, the actual knowledge is perhaps divine or in some other realm or somewhere out there unattainable. But the bare minimum we can do is be perfect scientists. That's the starting point. And this is the way to kind of avoid dogma and, all the failed gods that thought they knew the answer. You just tell yourself, look, even the best thing we have has gone through revolutions, right? You're reading a book about that. It has gone through revolutions where, like, Marie Curie died because she was just kind of
for our sins,
just because she was chilling near Mercury or something, right? So you have to understand
No, she was on Earth.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is the fallen part, and then the angel part is, again, I'm going to say it in religious terms because he does. We're all capable of redemption. That's all it is. And the angel status is reached when, obviously, you remain at all times humble and know that you are indeed fallen, and take science as the starting point of knowledge, but not as the end point. The American experiment. So for me, you always take these narratives and you try to include the most things that explain them into them, right? And one of the things that could explain this is that America is a young country, discovered first by American explorer Christopher Columbus.
Vespucci.
Christopher Columbus in 1504. Sisyphus of Columbus. So
in Colombia.
Yeah, and that's obvious. Now,
why? What was the point of that?
Well, the point was to say that he was the first to discover it.
Okay,
and that's the joke. So,
so it's very young, very recently discovered.
Very recently discovered, and you take all these parts of the narrative, again, as you said, government by the people, instead of some definite things or some, I don't know, even the amendments, I guess he would say, look, it's all an ongoing debate. Just frame everything that's going on, all the conflict, and all the, I guess, wars, right? Civil wars, as an ongoing debate for the betterment of it. I guess, right? That's I mean, again, I don't know much about America. He says to view it as such, so that every debate isn't like two people who don't see themselves as fallen angels and actually think they're ideal and they're battling it out, just framing from that to something like we're all just trying to strive for the better, right? I feel like that's what it is at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of education, he further says that this is what schools should teach, right?
Yeah.
It should teach that in America, what this ideal is that in America, you're taught in school, look, you contribute to the argument. You're going to be a citizen in America here, and in larger or lesser amounts, you can contribute to the argument of politics and where this country goes, and you should, and it's an active process, and you are part of it.
Yeah, fair enough. That kind of summarizes the whole thing. So the law of diversity, I think this chapter pretty much summarizes all it is, and it has a joke. The idea of diversity is a rich narrative around which to organize the schooling of our young, but there are right reasons to do this and wrong ones. The worst possible reason, as I have to already discuss, is to use the fact of ethnic diversity to inspire a curriculum of revenge. That is, for a group that has been oppressed to try even the score with the rest of the America by signaling itself out for expressive praise and attention. Although the impulse to revenge is in itself understandable, such a view will lead to weird falsifications, divisiveness, and isolation. Do you understand what I'm saying with prophetic thinkers?
Oh.
Like,
Yeah.
at the peak of 2020 something, still the same thing that is in the 90s, you know? There is a joke about this that Jews tell each other about themselves. One day, in a small town in Russia, circa 1900s, a Jew notices many people in panic, running this way and that, shouting for help. He stops another Jew and asks, "What is happening?" He is told that there is a circus in town and the lions have escaped from their cages. "Is this good or bad for the Jews?" he asks. That is hilarious. And it kind of relates to the spaceship Earth, right? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean is it good or bad for the Jews? What do you mean it affects this or that? And this is where, you know, I am blessed with a lack of knowledge about all these specific historical, but this happened, that happened, these people oppressed that, blah, 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 blah. Like, everything is everything. I want the better for everyone. I do not care. Obviously, I am heavily biased against evil people, but still, it's not like I'm going to put a label on you. I'm going to evaluate you according to your actions, right? And some people are, well, you know the history of that. It really all comes down to this joke where people say, where it's this group and that group, and it's not even about the actions. It's just about the origin or some stupid stuff that can be modified within a second.
I think the metaphor, why it matters is just obviously a lion, or whatever you want to apply this metaphor to in society, whatever problem is haunting us right now, is a problem for everyone. That's what the joke is, and that's why the metaphor is important. Is if there's a bigger problem, such as you said, the spaceship Earth, that we need to conserve Earth, and that we're all just tenants, and if there's a bigger problem, then those differences sort of fade in importance, and we all just want what's best for everyone. But at the same time, in this chapter, he also talks about the value of the different cultures, and this is the chapter about entropy, right?
Yeah, negentropy.
Negentropy, which is the actions that
of entropy.
Yeah, the actions that slow down entropy. I guess I should talk about it. It's interesting. The way he talks about it is the second law of thermodynamics is that disorder always increases.
Thou shalt bear arms. Sorry, whatever.
Thou shalt bear arms.
Whatever.
the disorder in the universe always increases, and everything tends towards disorder. Let's not get into the physics of it, but basically, we humans need structure and organization, and what the universe tends to is disorganization and just everything being homogeneous. And in a society, what Postman says is that would be undesirable, of everyone just being the same, and it would just be, I guess, boring, and there would be no progress, no other points of view.
It's also
important
physically impossible in that sense, right?
of everyone being completely homogeneous.
Right.
It can be in higher or lesser degrees, but
I think what I'm trying to say is that we would be going against nature just by the laws of entropy.
in doing what?
In trying to stabilize everything to the same.
We would be working with nature. What entropy is that disorder increases, and let's say, entropy is disorder, and that creates homogeneity.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay, I
like-
see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like the one end is like complete segregation, where there's this group of people here, this group of people here, this group here. In between, there's like overlap. People are friends within here, people are friends within here, and that's, I guess, the ideal. But still, those cultures maintain their traditions and their values and everything, and they can contribute to others. And then on the other end is everyone is mixed together,
And everything is chaos. Right?
and everything is just the same ultimately, because there's no groups that value this or this more.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. So negentropy is kind of working against nature, but it's obviously positive in that sense. Okay, and I am a primary agent of negentropy. So
Put that in your Insta bio.
yeah. So again, Wittgenstein, getting back to the fifth god, Wittgenstein says language is both the vehicle of thought and the driver. And I think this can be reconciled with what we've said back in the day, when the format of the podcast was still good, and it was my playground. It's that there are so many ambiguous stimuli that we sometimes want to think like, well, it's not sometimes want to think. The unanalyzed version of what language is just, look, something very concrete is happening in my mind, and then I am driving it into another's mind with the vehicle of language. But what actually happens is that you don't really know 100% of what you're thinking or what's going on in your mind, and everything is kind of ambiguous. Everything is kind of a yellow light, and the driver sitting in that car is language itself, and whatever comes out of your mouth can kind of create reality in many situations, a situation.
Yeah, so the point is, I guess what your metaphor is, like, in your mind is just a jumbled mess, and then what you're saying is not exactly what's going on in your mind, inevitably, and language and words play a critical role in the sense that they force that jumbled mess to come out into reality, but also to come out into reality in a certain way. If we didn't have the same language, if we didn't have these words, it could come out in entirely another meaning. I think this is quite abstract, but
Yeah, again, there's a lot of God metaphor in there, but you can also analyze it with a non-God perspective. And I've thought about it extensively because I've written a few blogs about it, so I think I get it. Let's see if we can work it out more. Here's a quote. They're not merely about how we sound to others, but about how we are sounding out to the world.
Yeah, in speaking, you choose the things that matter. The words you say, there are infinite possibilities in what you could say. What you're doing in saying things, and what the evolution of languages has done in choosing these words to exist to refer to these specific things, is saying that these things are important and we should point them out. And so you're giving a meaning to the world through your words.
Yeah, and it also has inherent ties to morality, because we use words that are profane, right? You can sin just by using words. So there's something deep in there, and it also has social ties and a bunch of other things that just almost exist in isolation with language, right? You can say a word that kind of carries out your mental state. For example, it could be anger. Anger is itself sinful, sure, but then you can say a profane word, and that is kind of a second sin that is self-contained in the language itself, you know?
I see.
You see, so it's like you're double sinning by having the anger. Okay, whatever. I don't think that's a sin. Expressing it, but then also using something
wrath.
profane, right? Wrath, but like wrath, I think, is also the expression of anger. It doesn't like surely even the most virtuous person can get angry. It just depends if you act on it.
I mean, we won't get into it, but maybe that's a sin too. Like
Just like feeling it?
probably you probably want to have a predisposition to just feeling
Like
at peace with everything,
like heavily practiced predisposition, right?
like Aristotle. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Now, I mean, we're getting to the end. Maybe there's something else you want to say, but I mean,
I don't like that smile.
this is where Neil just kind of like whatever, right?
Say it again. Strokes you in the right sense of the feathers.
And let's start the quote, guys. The well-known German philosopher Martin Heidegger believed that only the German language could express the subtlest and most profound philosophical notions. Perhaps he meant incomprehensible notions.
What are the chances that he said exactly what you wanted him to say like that?
That is incredible. And it's such a good roast. It's such a good roast. Like, the subtlest and most philosophical notions. Yeah, maybe he meant the most incomprehensible notions. So yeah, lovely.
Good note to end it on, I think.
Yeah, it's a pretty good note to end it on. My favorite is probably the last point, the last god. Now, could they, as being intertwined, give a larger purpose? I think the only issue for me is that he gives this cohesiveness, and maybe in the 90s it made sense to focus on that. He gives this kind of being united to make Earth a better place in a way, with all these religious metaphors, the fallen angel, just like be the most virtuous person that you can be. Don't take multiculturality as a disadvantage. Make it positive, and don't make it about I am a Jew, therefore I will only care about Jews, right? The spaceship Earth and whatnot, and work together on this, right? And also be careful how you talk. So sure, maybe learning language well seems like a noble goal, but I feel like what's missing is kind of an incentive for eternal curiosity and actually just becoming a richer person, because you can take all these gods in. Sure, I mean, maybe develop your language, and not even develop, really, just be careful about what you do with your language, and still just not strive for much in life. Like, sure, you can strive for harmony and diversification in a positive way, but what's the purpose of being excellent? You know, like, think about a kid in math class, right? He's adopted all these 5 gods. What's in it for him? Like, why would he go and do all these math problems?
Well, I think you're trying to take these gods as justifying life, but that's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to justify education. Why do we get educated? And I guess doesn't address the deeper question of why do we live.
Well, I think he frames education in a way that can be tolerable, in the sense that, yeah, everyone has to kind of harmonize and work together on this. And I'm not sure what I'm talking about as help to live. I'm just talking about, I thought the initial goal was to take the unmotivated, perhaps asocial kid who just doesn't want to learn and doesn't see the purpose of it, and could, get out of high school and go right to working and probably have a fine life, and take him and just like make him a lover of education. But that's just not what happened.
Yeah, but I think the steps you have to take are not very far, right? You think about the spaceship Earth and you realize, oh, I need to learn how to conserve this Earth, how to live at peace with everyone. And if you care about humanity, you're going to care about education and doing this better. The fallen angel, I'm not so sure. The American experiment, if you care about your society, if you care about your political values, you're going to say, I'm going to get as educated as I can so I can participate in the argument and argue towards a better society.
Okay, so the metaphors are good, but he doesn't really... Oh, wait. Okay, so what's important to know is that part 2 of the book is those 5 gods, and the next 5 chapters are expansions of those 5 gods. But the thing is, in this exposition of the gods, he doesn't address my point. He completely focuses on kind of the social harmony side of things. But as you just revealed to me, these gods do have the capacity to make up for that discrepancy that I pointed out, but he doesn't focus on it.
I guess that's the next step.
maybe it's the next step, but even if he did an exposition of the gods, he would have at least mentioned that they can contribute to this goal, right? In the American experiment, you must be the most educated version of yourself to make the experiment better, to be the best scientist you can be, and give the modifications necessary to the experiment to actually succeed. In the spaceship Earth, you must be a good captain, right? All of these things for the actual betterment of a person, they're present in the metaphors, but they haven't been explored. So, okay, fine. Practical. I mean, again, I think chapter 1 was everything we needed. These are great. And it's just to remember that when in these momentary moments of apathy or, maybe indecision and whatnot, the thing to remember is the deeper purpose. Is to try to just go back to the root. And even in moments of motivation, I think that's the best time to establish what is driving you as a deeper purpose. What is driving you? Because, if those mechanisms aren't established, I would say, from my experience, in the moments of sadness, you're fully going to feel the sadness. You're not going to turn to, well, I know people do that. They turn to God in their worst moments, obviously. But it feels like internalizing there's more fish in the sea before the breakup is a lot more useful than after the breakup when you're crying and eating ice cream.
Just telling yourself that there's more fish in the sea.
Yeah, like it's not that useful in that moment.
Yeah, and what's the practicality? If we are, as he argues, in a state where no dominant gods are here and we don't have that sort of meaning inherent in society, you create and you choose your own gods that matter to you, but you must have a narrative there. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, and a narrative that fits with all, your goals. Because in your best moments, you always know what your goal is. Like, you want to be a good person, but then when someone cuts you off in traffic, whoops, right? So in your best, it's like, don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry, right? It's the same thing. Don't be making moral decisions when you're angry. Find your gods in moments of peace.
And stick to them.
So again, we're going to deliver on our promise. We're going to follow these gods for the next 2 years, and we're going to have an episode to update how we feel. Little physiological changes and whatnot, pre-perception or whatever. Sigh. It makes me sigh. So thanks a lot. What's the rating?
Okay, 3, 2, 1,
8.
9. Oh,
wow.
We switched it up.
I couldn't pre-perceive what you said. Yeah, I'm gonna go with 9. It was fine, right? Like, we all had it down. I think I just didn't have enough time to process the psi thing, but there's not much to process realistically, and because I had to skim, it feels in my mind like it's not that clear, but it is clear. So thanks all for listening. We'll see you next week. You can go to thinkinbros.com for more information or contact us at thinkinbros@gmail.com. I'm Chris.
I'm Alex.